everybody. I'm going to sit because the cord to our mic is very short. So this will be an interesting matter when we open it up to general questions. My name is Sarah Dorsch. I am the chair of the Ward 3 Democratic Committee, which is hosting this event. It's our second annual event. The committee is comprised of 11 members. If you have any questions, please come up to any of us at the end. Jim Barefoot is one member, and Joe Lee is another member, and we have 2 members out front helping people come in. We are thrilled that you're here. We are thrilled that these people are here as well. The format for tonight's event is a brief introduction by each representative, senator, yes, yeah, the idea. Then we will open it up to questions. The questions, please, if you could think about being concise, also questions that pertain to the entire ward or the state, but not something like, there's a crack in my sidewalk. We're trying to keep this, I know, sidewalks.
John, I already know about the crack in the sidewalk.
And we will have time at the end maybe to talk a little bit one-on-one, but we also want to be respectful of the people who work in this wonderful building because they need to get home to their families and get up for school tomorrow. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Sue.
Awesome.
Is this close enough? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I am Sue Anderbois. I am your city councilor for Ward 3. And I think you guys have a lot of questions, so instead of me telling you like a list of things we do, I will pass it to Edith. But we'll also quickly remind you that council is year-round. And so we don't have a session in the way that the General Assembly does. So we operate 11 months out of the year, so we're just kind of always in session except August. So just as a quick heads up on that.
Hello, my name is Edith Ajello, or Edith Ajello. I am State Representative, House District 1, which, fun fact, House District 1 voted for Kamala Harris with a bigger margin than any other district.
And then see if I can turn it up.
So that's a fun fact about House District 1. I work in the House of Representatives. We are not in session until January. I'm interested to hear ideas, things that you think I should be addressing in the coming session. Okay. And that's all I have to say, but I am prepared to answer questions.
Sam, hold the mic close to your mouth, very close to your mouth.
Good evening, friends, and thanks for coming tonight. My name is Sam Zurier, and I'm actually one of 3 state senators who represents a portion of Ward 3. The state senate districts are actually as big as 2 or 3 wards, but the way they're carved up, there are 3 of us who represent portions of the neighborhood. I'm not going to give an extensive speech, but I'm going to give you 3 projects I'm working on that I'd be happy to discuss in further detail if you're interested. Project number 1 is the Providence Public Schools. They're coming back to local control probably at the end of the school year, and they're projects I'm working on to try to ensure that they operate more successfully upon return to local control. Project number 2 is something called the Act on Climate. It's a structure that the General Assembly passed 4 years ago to make the state net zero carbon neutral by 2050. And I'm on the study commission to see how successfully we are on track to implement that. And tied to that is number 3, which is RIPTA, or Rhode Island Public Transit Authority. Unfortunately, we did not give them enough money to do their job in last year's budget. And I've been working on ideas to try to bring to the General Assembly next year to get proper funding for RIPTA. So those are 3 topics I'd love to talk about, but anything else you want to hear about, I'd be delighted to speak about also.
Hello everyone, I am State Senator Tiara Mack. I represent parts of Ward 3 ending at, I think, Grandview, and then going down to South Main, and then also Jewelry District, Upper South Side, Lower South Side, and parts of the West End and downtown. So it's a wonky district that was gerrymandered and cut up, but I live right here on Camp Street in this neighborhood and have been the state senator in this area for the last 5 years. I'm on the Housing Municipal Government Committee, the Commerce Committee, and the Education Committee. I'm also the Senate representative on the Rhode Island Commission for Prejudice and Bias. I am the chair of the Maternal Health Innovation and Continuous Improvement Program through the Rhode Island Department of Public Health, working on maternal health issues, so our main birthing hospitals in the state, and specifically addressing Black maternal health and Black maternal health disparities. The other projects that I'm working on, to take a note from Senator Zurier's book, is the chair of the Rhode Island Black Latino Caucus, coordinating with our food security, whether that's SNAP and WIC, which is currently under threat to the government shutdown. Tenant rights and housing are some of the biggest issues that I also focus on specifically for renters and renter rights. Currently working with the Center for Justice and Reclaim on passing a tenant's right to counsel piece of legislation, something that has been a focus of mine for the last 5 years, and working with a national organization on that. And I'm also chair of the Rhode Island Black Latino and AAPI Caucus, and we also host a series of policy priorities every year, about 15 policy priorities that range from taxing the rich to greater representation of minority businesses in our communities and in state contracts. Happy to talk about any or all of those things with you guys during this hour or afterwards.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Meghan Kallman. It is also my privilege to represent a funky chunk of Ward 3. I think I'm the only one here that represents 2 cities, so the other part of my district is Pawtucket. So this last year, we passed in the Rhode Island General Assembly a bill of mine that had been many years in the making, called the Taylor Swift tax. It was the only progressive reform to the tax code that passed this year. And it's really important. We are, as Senator Zurier said, running out of money for some really important services, RIPTA among them. Other projects that I'm working on there, I actually had a lot of really excellent advocacy from folks in this room over the Building Decarbonization Act, which passed the Senate 2 years ago and then stalled last year, and we're hoping that next year is the year to get it over the line, so that's been my privilege to take care of that bill for a couple of years. Tiara and I worked very closely together on a lot of housing issues. As you may or may not know, Rhode Island is 50th in the country for building new housing, and so we've had some challenges keeping our folks in affordable housing in their communities, in places that are near where they live and work, etc. So that is something we've been trying to work on cracking. Over the long term, RIPTA remains a priority of mine. A couple of years ago, we did the free R-line pilot, which ran right through this district, and that was a very successful thing. And then, of course, the General Assembly did not see fit to fund RIPTA fully, so we got to fix that. But in general, this upcoming session, I've also been working in criminal justice reform with some allies right here in the room, and those are some priorities that continue to be more and more important as we're facing down the issues nationally. And I will stop there, and we can discuss in detail.
Okay, as you can see, we're going to be challenged with a mic. I'm thinking that maybe we will try to form a bit of a queue over here so people can come up and we can try to get into the mic all in a line maybe. I will emphasize, because I will be cutting people off this year, we did not do that last year. Please keep your questions good for the entire ward, brief, concise, and then we will move along and hopefully get many questions in. Okay? Thank you.
I have a pretty big voice, so I don't even think I need the mic, actually.
Probably should use it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. Once again, looking at this wonderful room of humans, I am once again so happy that I live in this neighborhood. Moved here from Los Angeles about 20 years ago. Love it, love it, love it, and I have an issue. And it is an issue for everyone. I'm sure you folks are aware of the extensive research that's out there these days about the health impacts of modified mufflers and noise that is like way above the decibel limit that it's supposed to be. Stress, sleep disruption, hearing loss. I have tinnitus. I've had to wear, earplugs for 20 years now. All night long, these cars are going by, backfiring and the rest. High blood pressure, heart disease, true and real health impacts from these modified mufflers and noise disturbance. I've been reporting license plates for probably about 10 years now. I noticed in the beginning when I was doing that, there would be changes in the neighborhood, actually. I would see the same cars and they no longer had the same sound. Recent years, not so much. So I really want, we're right here at MLK, there's kids floating up and down Camp Street, I live right over here on Camp Street. Really would love to have a noise camera at the corner of Camp and Doyle. I think it really warrants it. Are we getting it? I know there's been some kind of movement in there, but I would love for this to actually really happen.
I'm happy to take that, unless we, I think that's more. Yeah. Oh, that's not working. Should I just go over there?
Great question. The mayor included in his budget this last year funding for noise camera pilot. And so there's a few, and at the end of all of our negotiations, there was still a little bit of money in there for noise cameras. I think it's out to RFP right now. I don't think they've picked the locations where the noise cameras will go. And I'm happy to check with his team on what process they think they're going to do to have those. I will say for Camp Street, we just advocate pretty strongly for these speed humps to help with like the cars that zoom by and make really loud noise, and also that are endangering to our kids.
Yeah, that was looking for the modified
Yeah.
roofers, of course. So.
Yeah, and so those just got installed this past summer, yeah. I can
Is there
check in
anywhere
on
I can lobby, any email address or anything that I can lobby for Camp and Doyle?
I have written that down in my notes, and I'll follow up with the mayor's team on what we're thinking
Okay,
about putting
thank
those.
you.
Yeah, no, thank you, appreciate it.
Great job. Who's next?
I've also got a loud voice. My name is Joanne, and I want to reference an article that recently appeared in Steve Alquist's fantastic journalism. That's Steve. It was a back and forth with Senator Zurier about Michael McCaffrey, who was Senate Majority Leader and is now up for a district judgeship. And during the time he was in the Senate, he voted against every single marriage equality and pro-choice thing that was trying to be legislated. And Steve was asking Senator Zurier about whether or not he would vote against McCaffrey if the governor puts him forth in front of the Senate. And basically, to paraphrase, and I apologize, Senator, if I get it wrong, Senator Zurier said, it's not worth being sent to Siberia. And the good things that I want to do, I have a tremor, I'm not afraid. The good things that I want to do, I might not be able to do if I stand up for what I believe about this. So I wanted to ask the senators what you have to say about that. I'm terrified that McCaffrey will end up on the Supreme Court in Rhode Island. So that's my question.
Thank you. So Senator Mack, Senator Zurier, and I actually, I think, all served with, we came in the same year, we all served with Senator McCaffrey for a couple of years. That said, you know, it's a small chamber, everybody has to work together, everybody has to be adults. But that said, I was elected on a set of values that include reproductive justice and reproductive freedom. Those are endorsements, and those are principles that I take really, really seriously. And as many of you may have followed some of the debate around the transition in leadership in the Senate this year, those are not principles that I'm willing to compromise on. And I did not vote for a majority or a leadership team that included a majority leader who held those positions. And I do not foresee myself voting for a judge who does either.
Thank you for your question. Similarly, I have been in Siberia for less in the Rhode Island Senate, and I think that is part of the reason why I have been elected to be in office, is not to just co-sign and rubber stamp leaders. We also live at a terrifying and troubling time where we've seen judges and the courts, mostly at the federal level, but the states are our last safeguard, especially in the rise of this authoritarian regime that is attacking judges and people who've been prosecutors. I think we need, at this moment, really strong judges in all of the courts. These are also pipelines potentially for Rhode Island's own Supreme Court. There are 3 open district court seats. There's a lot going on in the courts in Rhode Island, not just the federal level. And so I think if you are someone who cares about the rule of law and the way that states can be protected during the next 3 years and beyond, because chaos. I think paying a little bit more attention to what's happening in the Rhode Island courts maybe won't help you sleep at night, but will help you see where some of your energy should be focused on. And again, someone who's been in the General Assembly, I believe Michael McCaffrey was elected the year that I was born. He was sworn in actually slightly before I was born, in the beginning parts of 1993. His record of over 30 years is anti-choice and anti-LGBTQ, and at a time where queer and trans communities, immigrants, and a host of other precious people in all of our communities throughout the country are under attack, I don't think this is the time to compromise on any of our values.
Steve Alquist transcribed a portion of our back and forth. He didn't transcribe everything. But even what he transcribed, I think, shows my view on this issue. What I said was that I wanted to have any candidate nominated by the governor be vetted in the Senate Judiciary Committee before I made a decision. I do not think it does anybody any good for us to announce decisions before we've had a chance to fully investigate things. And if he were up for the Supreme Court, then some of these policy issues might become more salient. This is the district court. The district court includes jurisdiction over such matters as small claims. Every matter that's decided by the district court is, virtually every matter, is subject to appeal in the Superior Court and then possibly the Supreme Court. I think that people are jumping to conclusions to say that somebody who has particular political views, that will affect how they do the district court. So Mr. Alquist, he said, well, suppose it's the case that there's a gay person who has a problem with their landlord, and suppose that comes before Mr. McCaffrey. Since he's so biased against gay people, that means that person's not going to get a fair hearing. That's putting one conclusion over another. It's not being fair to the candidate. And I might add, and I mentioned this at the meeting, that you look at one of the greatest Supreme Court justices, Hugo Black. He became a Supreme Court justice after having been a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He told people that once he became a Supreme Court justice, he would apply the law fairly to all people. And he became one of the greatest defenders of civil rights. So I think it's quite possible that this person is a good candidate for the district court. I might add, by the way, that I think there are like 8 or 9 district court judges. So, it's not as if this is going to be the one person making policy for the state of Rhode Island. He happens to have good legal skills, and that's important in the district court, as well as their view on a particular policy issue. So, it is true that any of us, if one assumes, and at this point I think it's premature to make these assumptions, but if one assumes that this person is chosen by the governor and it goes before the Senate, and one assumes that the leadership is not going to tolerate no votes, that one might pay a price. And Mr. Alquist pushed me into that situation. And I put it to him because there was someone else in the group who was very interested in environmental issues. His name is Crispy Roseland. So I said to Mr. Alquist, suppose it were the case that I had a choice between casting a no vote on this nomination or being able to do a good job with this climate commission. Which choice would you recommend? You would recommend that I vote no on this vote. And then I said, Mr. Roseland, what would you recommend? Would you recommend that I vote no on this vote, or that I do my work on this Act on Climate Commission? That was the context. And then, Mr. Alquist said, well, you're not showing courage. This is not a matter of courage. This is a matter of trying to be effective. Now, if I had someone who was said as a judge that they were committed to denying the rights of people, that would be one thing. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the district court, and that's why I think it's very possible that I would vote for this person because I think that they could be a good district court judge.
Okay. Do we have more questions? Marcus, do you want to come on up?
I think I can speak from here.
Why don't you come on up? We're asking everyone to use the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two questions. So first is the City Council, Providence City Council just released their Housing Crisis Task Force report, and they had several recommendations. Big proponent of rent stabilization. So among the other recommendations, I'd like to hear your thoughts about that report and the recommendations, including the state contention, because you know, your state elected officials, but your constituents are all here in Ward 3, and it affects them all.
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
You can't hear me.
You have to put it really close to your mouth.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, so rent stabilization and the task force report. I'd like your thoughts on that. And that's also another issue that I think is moving for us that I'm not hearing enough about, and that's the World Soccer Cup Championships in Foxborough in June. And Rhode Island, Providence will be the de facto host because we're closer and cheaper. People are already booking their rooms, and I'm thinking about the impact on marginalized communities because of it. So first, there are told that there'll be 1 billion people watching, and that makes us a target, terrorist target, and there'll be increased policing, and I'm concerned about over-policing. Also concerned about, again, with housing, that people might, displace folks to make a big profit in 5 or 6 weeks, and that has an effect on just the general economy of the increase that we've seen in other host cities for large events, and the essential prices go up, and they really never come back down, putting people over the edge. So those issues, I want to hear your thoughts about what we might be able to do to support our infrastructure, transportation, and everything leading up to these World Soccer Cup Championships.
I feel like I get de facto first because I'm sitting right next to the microphone. Thank you, great questions. So I'm halfway through the Providence Housing Report. It is open in a tab on my computer. So if somebody wants to summarize for me what happens at the end, do. As far as rent stabilization goes, that is a conversation that actually Senator Mack and I have had a number of times over the course of our time in the General Assembly, but I want to link it actually to the stated question. So we passed and the governor vetoed, right, a bill a year and a half ago about Airbnbs that was instituting a sort of minimum rental term to prevent this exact kind of thing, right? So that you see this a lot in South County where people, get displaced for the summer because someone can make $20,000 in 3 months or whatever. So this was actually brought forward by the senator from Newport, who is seeing the consequences of this in the district. The advent of the World Cup is going to make this relevant for all of us in a way that it has not historically been up here. So I think there are 3 ways that we need to be going about it. One is we need to pass these minimum rental limits, right, which protect people against those sort of vagaries of the short-term rental market. We need to be doing that very seriously. It's overdue already for parts of the state, and it's going to become increasingly relevant for us now. We need to continue to build housing because, again, we have an undersupply, and we have an undersupply at the income level where people struggle most to find housing at the sort of bottom of the economic spectrum. And we have very little housing that's actually protected as quote-unquote affordable, right? And like federal assistance only reaches about a quarter of people who are eligible for that. So we do need to keep building. We need some rental protections in there. Rent stabilization is a big thing. Also, we just passed this year a townhomes bill, which is designed to help for more efficient construction of various things. That's not obviously going to be, we're not going to be building a ton between now and the time the World Cup lands. But what we can do is offer some protections. The best opportunity that I see here for us actually is, as Senator Zurier was talking about RIPTA earlier, that this is one of our opportunities to actually really make sure that our public transit system is well-funded and in good shape, there is no way that this city is going to be able to sustain that many visitors in vehicles. It's just like it literally, physically cannot happen. Which means we have an opportunity to think about what it would take to move people efficiently and safely from one part of this town, or a town or city, or between here and Foxborough, back and forth well. And I believe that's an opportunity we really have to take advantage of, because if what we get out of this is an improved transit system, I will count that as a win, and I would like for that to be at least one of the outcomes.
We'll talk a little bit about the renter issues in there. Since I've been in the General Assembly from 2021, which was the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, I've introduced a host of tenant rights legislation. In 2023, passed a bill to seal evictions for the first time in Rhode Island. So you can seal an eviction one every 5 years. Right now, we have temporary funding for some legal counsel through the Roger Williams Law Clinic, Rhode Island Legal Services, and Center for Justice. Last year, we also passed a notification period, increased notification. Your landlord has to now give you 60 days of notice or 90 days if you were over the age of 63. There have been a host of other pieces of legislation in a package called the Tenant Rights Bill, which is a suite of 5 bills that included a 4% rent cap year over year, which would enable municipalities to cap rents at 4% or tie it to consumer pricing index. There's a host of different ways that municipalities have been able to close down on rental prices. A few municipalities in California have done it based on consumer pricing index, plus or minus 8%. Connecticut has some rent stabilization or rent capping. Indianapolis, New York, Pennsylvania, DC. There's a couple of different models, but I think it also comes down to political will. I am one of only about 5 renters in the entire General Assembly, which is 115 legislators in both the House and the Senate. So having real voice of people, I've been a renter on Camp Street for the last 10 years. My rent has gone up by $100 every single year. So when I first started renting, $1,400 on Camp Street. It is now $2,200 on Camp Street. Same apartment, nothing's changed except there's a nice poke place, and Oak Street is like 5 houses down from me now. But those are the only fundamental changes. My building is a 6-unit building. So one thing that we also did pass last year, I believe this was actually your bill, Senator Zurier, was to change the zoning for buildings with 6 units to no longer be commercial. So folks who live in larger buildings now are not, their residential taxes are cheaper than they were before. So that should have saved some people money, but unfortunately, if you've been following pro-Joe in housing, the cost of people's homes have quite literally just increased, in some cases doubled since this bubble of the housing market. So lots of folks have been priced out of the home buying process, and we don't really see an end. Rhode Island has been listed time and time again as a hot housing market. So folks from Boston, Connecticut, New York have now found cheaper quote-unquote housing prices, but have priced a lot of people who live in this neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods out of historically Black neighborhoods, historically Jewish neighborhoods, and other traditionally affordable neighborhoods now no longer have people whose children or grandchildren can see themselves as multi-generational Providence residents on certain sides of town. The other part of the issue, the question was about the World Cup. There is a commission that was started, that the Senate approved this legislative cycle for the FIFA World Cup. It is headed by the former chair or the former lead of the Rhode Island Commerce, Liz Tanner, and that is expected that Rhode Island will get about $1 billion in revenue from FIFA being in this region, between Warwick, Providence, Pawtucket, and then whatever else is happening in like the Foxborough, Massachusetts area. So there are people thinking about the economics. Some of the things that I'm most interested in is making sure that Black and brown small business owners also see some of the profit. There's going to be lots of art, culture, and tourism that we can highlight the great things that happen in Rhode Island, places to eat, people to see, and the history to really absorb as one of the core states and cities involved in the founding of this nation. So if you do have other concerns about what the economics or safety plans or policing will look like, I think that is a great commission that is started and has a few key leaders boards who are thinking about some of those issues for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. I don't really know much about soccer other than that.
You've just heard from two of the stars in the Senate House, and it's really not my ability to add much to their very kind remarks. I'm just going to say a couple of things on the side. Senator Kallman talked about the need to increase stock housing. And what we've learned is that there's a lot of red tape at the local level that prevents housing projects from going forward. I read a very interesting book called Stuck by Yogi Applebaum that talks about it in a national context. But this General Assembly is kind of dealing with the fact that local communities aren't doing enough, and they're kind of sensitive to how much do we step on local toes. And they've set up a housing plan, the state has set up a housing plan to see how much local authorities will yield on red tape through incentives rather than through mandates. And we'll just have to see how that works. The other thing is I'll take the opportunity to talk a little bit about what I'm doing with the repairs budget. They had a $10 million hole at the end of the session. I put in an amendment to say take $10 million basically from the transportation budget and move that over to RIPTA. And it actually came pretty close to passing the Senate, but we didn't quite make it. The reason why I wanted to do that is that we're going to have a lot of stress on our general revenues in the coming year. We're getting a lot of news, bad news from Washington about declining support for some of our critical programs. And I don't think it's realistic to think that we'll be able to use general revenues to fill that hole in RIPTA. On the other hand, the Rhode Island Department of Transportation has more money than the almighty one, Pleasant View. And the state required RIPTA to do an efficiency study. And they completed the study, and RIPTA showed it was pretty efficient. We've just gotten something called a forensic audit report about the Washington Bridge, which is in a way an efficiency study about the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. And I think we have a case to make that the Department of Transportation is not operating efficiently. The $10 million away from their budget would do much less harm to Rhode Islanders than the harm that the $10 million hole is doing on the RIPTA budget. And I'm trying to put together my facts and figures with the help of the Senate Fiscal Office to try to make that case go through. So it's not a pure answer to the question, but after the two housing experts who spoke before me, it's the best I can do.
Can I say something quickly? I think that feeds into something that I've noticed. I've lived at my house for 40 years. And when I've seen how the city handles the public works projects, it's an absolute joke. As a small example, it took me years to get the city to come and replace my sidewalk, which was in terrible shape. What an independent contractor would have spent in a day and a half to put 10 feet of sidewalk, the city spent about 3.5 weeks. One guy would come, they'd leave for 5 days. Another guy would come. In the meantime, my neighbor's sidewalk needed to be done. They finished my sidewalk, and then a month later, they did my neighbor's sidewalk. I mean, when people see monies that aren't being managed properly, we pay taxes, people get frustrated with that. And there has to be an oversight, so it doesn't matter if it's a bridge, if it's RIPTA, if it's the guys putting in sidewalks, if the guys that have done tree work on my street. I don't know where they find these guys. I've had private people do tree work at my house that are sensitive about how they lop off the branches. These guys come by with chainsaws, willy-nilly, cutting down the street trees. It's the snow removal in my neck of the woods is appalling. I mean, I've been in cities where they get 15 inches of snow and they know how to deal with it. I have a 2-block long street that's near the Army guys, and they can barely clear the street. I mean, so I think I don't know who has oversight in how public monies are used to do some of those kind of maintenance projects. You drive down the boulevard, there are dangerous
Cut
trees.
you off right there. I think your question is, who has oversight?
Yeah.
That, I will answer that after I answer Marcus.
Well, Edith is going to
Yeah.
answer Marcus's question, and then Sue
I'll
will
answer all the
your
questions, yeah.
I am working with colleagues on the issue of rent stabilization. It's something that I think that we have to do carefully. History has shown in some communities that when you do too strong of rent stabilization, you end up with landlords turning their apartments into condos, which are not then available for the tenants that we're concerned about. So I think rent stabilization done carefully, cautiously, is a good idea, and I hope that the city will do that. I don't have much hope that the General Assembly will, at least on the House side. On the issue of RIPTA, I too feel very strongly that Rhode Island needs to step up to the plate, find the money in the Department of Transportation's budget to fund RIPTA more than the 10 million that they're short. I have read, and I wish I could remember the numbers, but Massachusetts and Connecticut, our two neighboring states, spend much more per capita on public transportation than Rhode Island does. And one of the concerns that Hasbro or another big business had with staying in Rhode Island or moving to Rhode Island was the quality of our public transportation. So there you are. We've got to get that right. We've got to find the money to not only fill the hole, but expand the availability so that people can travel to work, they can travel to medical appointments, they can go shopping. They don't need a car. It's better for the environment, better all the way around. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to answer all three questions. So for folks who came in between, I'm just going to restate them before I answer them. So the first was about the Housing Crisis Task Force report that the City Council just released. So number one, if you have not yet seen that report yourself, it's on the City Council's website. I've also included it in a recent newsletter so that you can read it yourself. If you're like, Sue, I don't have any of the access to either of those things, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you some cards of mine. I'm happy to send you the report. That report was the result of about 2 years worth of Housing Crisis Task Force committee meetings and some really extensive research done by our policy team on council, chaired by Councilwoman Harris. So there's some really good stuff in there, but again, a plan or a report is just a report, and what really matters is whether or not and how it gets implemented. And so, as many of my more statewide colleagues have mentioned, there's a lot of things we have to do to address the housing crisis that we have in Providence and statewide. And that's been a big priority of mine as well on council. Many of you were at my housing forum that I held this spring with Speaker Shikarchi. You gave some really good questions then. But just a few things. One is, I think the rent stabilization is just one tool that we have in the toolbox. I think sometimes folks act like it's an either or between rent stabilization and building more housing, when really it's a yes and. We need a hammer, we need a screwdriver, we need all the things in that toolbox. But Rep. Ajello's point, we need to do it well. And so I've been really grateful for all of the small independent landlords who've reached out to me to talk about how their thoughts on like how it can be really done well and continue to support the small scale landlords that we have in Ward 3 who live in their homes and then just rent out the top 2 apartments maybe. So there's ways you can do it well, there's also ways you can do it pretty poorly. And so we should have that first draft of that ordinance, introduced later this fall, is my understanding from our council president. And I would really encourage all of you to please read it. I will include links to it in my newsletter, like I usually do for stuff like this. And let me know your thoughts, because I'll want to hear. We want to make sure that we do it well and we do it in a way that really helps folks. And to that point, other things that are in that report are around building more housing, prioritizing low-income housing. There's a lot of really great stuff in there, but the devil will be in the details and whether and how we implement it. And I'm very much a doer, and so we're gonna be going through that list, trying to figure out, how we sequence that. And we haven't been sitting on our laurels. Some of the stuff we've already done. Many of you participated in the updates to our comprehensive plan, which increased density around the city to allow us to do more building in more places. And so there are a number of things we've already been working on. Happy to talk more about that. The second was about the World Cup soccer that's coming to Foxborough end of next June. That will have big impacts on the city. One, what an exciting opportunity to showcase our amazing city to so many people from around the world, probably coming into our city. So one huge, awesome opportunity, and also flip side to Marcus's point, some real challenges that we need to really address. So a few things on my mind that I've been working on. One is in the city's budget. The Council Finance Committee did commit additional funds to the Providence Emergency Management Agency, so that, led by former Ward 3er, but now Ward 4, Clara DeServo, so that she and her team can really be planning and prepping ahead of time for how to handle the influx of people that will be coming. June is an incredibly busy time in our city. There's a lot of other events that happen then, so this is coming at kind of like a, oh my gosh, we're already a bit overwhelmed moment in time. And so having Clara and her team, and Clara is the best emergency management professional in the whole Northeast region, so we are really lucky to have her. But having her team really lead that effort, I think it will be important. Second, I've met with Liz Tanner, who used to be Secretary of Commerce and now is leading the effort that Senator Mack mentioned. And I shared with her some of the concerns that Marcus raised about housing and displacement. I've also met with Chief Perez about some of this to make sure that these are on their agendas as well, so that when we're thinking about there might be additional police presence, what does that mean for most vulnerable populations and making sure our own residents feel safe. So I'm trying to make sure that the issues that Marcus and others are raising are on the minds of the people who will be making those decisions at that time, and just staying vigilant, so that we're really preparing for this moment, because it could be a really great opportunity. I love seeing so many people come to our city and get to experience the best city in the whole world. And also, we ought to be prepared. It could be a mess otherwise. And so we really need to make sure that our city is prepared. And the third thing, which before I get to that question about the housing report, I would encourage you, I'm on a panel next week. I'm not encouraging you this because I'm on the panel, but I just think you'll find it interesting. There's another book in addition to Stuck, which was also a really good book, called Why Nothing Works. And the author of that book will be coming to Providence next week in a forum co-sponsored by Neighbors Welcome, the Providence Foundation, and Grow Smart Rhode Island. I'm on that panel to discuss that book of Why Nothing Works and how we can get government to actually work and do big things like we can do and should be doing. So that panel will be next Wednesday, and it's in my newsletter. So if you're on my newsletter, or you just go to my website, sueanderbois.com, the latest newsletter is there, and you can see information about that. You just have to register to show up. It'll be downtown. And to the really great question about our public works, yeah, we need to do better at that. So a few things going on there. One is I have an ordinance right now in committee that should pass by the end of the year, particularly holding our utilities accountable for the impacts that they have on both our streets and other things. Some of the really shoddy work that we see happening in our streets and also in our trees will be when the utility tears up, particularly the gas utility, but all utilities, tear up our roads to make improvements or to touch their infrastructure that's underneath. I don't want to say it's always improvements, but to touch the infrastructure that's underneath. And so the ordinance I have both requires them to release publicly, well in advance, information about where they're going to be doing that they have to commit to making sure residents know what's happening, and then provide some more oversight by the city as well as the council to making sure that they're doing a quality job, because they're not. They are just not. I hear from residents all the time about the low quality job that's happening, particularly from the gas utility. For the other pieces, that's a big part of what the Finance Committee, the Council, and also the Public Works Committee are trying to do. I think we have some really great city staff who are working hard at this, and also there's tons of room for improvement. And so please, when you're seeing examples of this, please reach out anytime. As we're seeing contracts come up, the finance committee, of which I'm a member, we're asking really hard questions of all the contractors. There's some contracts we're not approving. And we're really demanding more accountability from the mayor and his administration on making sure that our public works and other city departments are doing right by our residents. We had a recent example where the street sweeper was working without a contract. We were like, we can't, what is this? Like, this is, you need to update the contracts when they run out. You can't just let people work without a contract, because then we can't hold them accountable. So that's been a big thing of the finance committee, but if you see any specific examples or things that aren't being done well, one, please put them in 311. And also, please feel free to email me, because sometimes I'm hearing from folks with the new 311 system, you're not hearing back, and that's unacceptable. And so it helps me to know that you've put something in there so I can have our staff on council follow up. Because it's unacceptable if you don't get any response. Sometimes the response might be, we can't do this yet, we'll do it later, or, you know, city staff we always need more resources. There's never enough staff, but you deserve a response and you deserve to know when it's gonna happen. So always feel free to reach out to me directly, and I have a bunch of cards I'm happy to follow up. And that was a lot of answers, so I'll let the next person go.
Hi, hello. Hi, I'm Hillary Lewis. I live down the street. My kids go to Barton, and my nephew goes to MLK. It's not a question, but I would not rush the return to local control. Right now, everybody on this stage has responsibility for the schools, like direct responsibility as state senators overseeing RIDE and involved at the state level. If we return to local control too quickly, we are not doing a service by the schools. I think there's a narrative right now that local control is this panacea. I do not think it is. I've never seen it be in any school that I worked in 25 years of education. I don't know what the right answer is, but I don't think that we should just be like on a bullet train to return to local control. That's my thought. And I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Thank you, Hillary, for your comment. And I second your motion, the idea that just having a return to local control with nothing else would be very problematic for the kids in Providence. Because my worry is that if we say to the state, we don't care what you do as long as you give it back, the state is going to say, okay, we now wash our hands of you folks in Providence. You can manage on your own, and we're not going to help you. Now, there's no question in anybody's mind that this takeover has not worked terribly well. And there was a time, this is going back to 2019, I was not in office, I was a private citizen. As an attorney, I represented 3 city council members who opposed the state takeover. And their argument, which I think was the right one at the time, was that the state should be doing more to help Providence rather than just take it over. I wish they had done that. But the state took it over, and at that point, I became committed to doing what I could to make the takeover work as well as possible. And it's been a struggle, and they've made a number of mistakes, and I've criticized them for that. But going back to what Hillary said, there is not only is it popular to say you need the schools to come back no matter what, there are also some political imperatives at play here. We have a mayor who's going to be seeking re-election, and he doesn't want to seek re-election without having regained control of the schools. We have a governor who's seeking re-election. And I speculate that this governor does not want to have these schools on his desk when he's seeking re-election. So I think there's a very strong political imperative for the schools to return at the end of the school year. And as a result, it becomes the responsibility of not only us as state government, but folks in local government, to have the most capacity for that transition to be successful. I was the chair of a study commission that looked at a number of these issues, and I was benefited by the service of Senator Kallman, who also served on that commission. And we came up with a report with some suggestions, and some of them involved more funding, more capacity, also some reforms to labor management relations, which would be bills that I'll be working on. But there's also got to be a lot of work at the city level. Just to give you an example, at a recent school board meeting, they were debating a resolution about whether the school board or the mayor has plenary authority over the schools. This is not what they should be working on. They should be working on figuring out ways to work together so that the school board, and the city council have the capacity and the knowledge to run the schools successfully when, as I predict, they will return to local control. I could have a lot more to say, but we have other questions. But I thank you so much, Lily, for raising that issue. And I hope that we in the city of Providence do our best to make sure that we manage that transition successfully.
Hillary, I'm really glad you raised that, and also I appreciate everything Sam Zurier just said. And just to highlight, I think many of us are eager to see the return to local control, but also know that without a plan, it could be, this is not close enough, it could be a disaster, or just not benefit the students. And I know, to the point I made earlier about a plan is just a plan, the mayor put out a report last May-ish, I think, about the return to local control, and it was a pretty solid plan. I provided a lot of comments to it. We didn't have a ton of time to provide comments to it, but I provided a lot of comments before he published it, but I'm not really sure what's happening since. So to Senator Zurier's point, if we're going to be ready, the school board, the council, the mayor, we all need to be working together to prepare for this, and I don't think any of us want to see it come back before I hope we don't want to see it come back before we're prepared. And we need to be taking more steps now if we're going to be prepared for that, and I'm not sure that those steps are happening. So I appreciate you raising that, yeah. And I see you know they're not, and that is accurate, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Laura Flynn. I live in the neighbourhood. I don't know that this is necessarily the right forum for this question, but there's a No Kings poster here, our party, so kind of a Rhode Island question. I'm watching the news. I'm watching ICE and National Guard descend into cities across the country. I know we're not New York, we're not Chicago, we're not that kind of target area the same way. But how much thought has been given to what happens if it happens here? What guidance has been given to our police about how they engage if ICE starts knocking down doors and pulling people out of cars or out of their homes? What's the guidance? What's our plan?
Already happening. In Rhode Island? Providence. So what's the plan?
I'm going to be brief because I think Councilor Anderbois actually so the General Assembly is out of session, which is not an excuse, but it is a reality. So we are not doing proactively anything at the moment. We are prepping for January. It is my view that in a moment like this, we ought to be doing more than prepping for January, but we are not doing that. So I will highlight two things. One, that Providence at the city level is working on some stuff. I'm going to pass to Sue in a second. But two, when you look at places like Chicago or Portland, the most robust protection is also coming from neighbors looking out for neighbors. Because everybody is trying to figure out what this actually means from a legislative perspective in an era when, like, I don't know, injunctions are not being honored. What we have first and foremost is ourselves. And so you can come talk to me afterwards and I can get you in touch with the folks who are doing that organizing if you wish. But I literally just spoke to a dear friend and co-author this afternoon who had to cut our conversation off early because she's going to do Ice Watch at school release time. And it is a sad state of affairs when we have somebody who doesn't have kids in school going to do Ice Watch, but she is doing it, which is better than nobody.
I will just add, the Rhode Island Black Latino Caucus has been in contact with the Rhode Island Immigration Coalition, talked to them today. The City of Providence does have an ordinance, I believe, this Thursday that they will be voting on, so we'll pass it down to Sue. And I will be in DC at an undisclosed time because you can never tell people where you are these days as an elected official, but we'll be meeting with the State Innovative Exchange to talk about how states, when we do get back into session, will be able to pass proactive immigration-focused piece of legislation. This year we did pass two critical pieces of protection. One is special immigrant juvenile cases, which I co-sponsored with Representative Batista, which puts youth from the ages of 18 to 21 in family court on a special pathway for green card citizenship if they are between the ages of 18 and 21. That pathway was previously left out of possibility, but we just granted that to mirror what we have in other states. So I'm super proud of that piece of legislation. It does need some work. We also banned landlords from asking for immigration status, which is technically already illegal, but laws also don't mean things anymore these days, which is a very sad statement. But there are lots of great organizations that are thinking about when General Assemblies do go back into session in January, what are some of the policies and legislation that we can pass. But if there are ideas, please don't hesitate. I encourage you all to go to actions that are the most comfortable for you. Everyone has different levels of risk tolerance. If you are someone who is able and willing to engage in things like Court Watch or Neighborhood Watch, or going to learn your rights, knowing your rights, carrying around your red card in your wallet if you don't already, especially if you plan on attending those protests. And then also grabbing a coffee or doing a walk with your state legislator, your city council member, anyone in local government is never a bad idea. There is so much happening every single day. But knowing your neighbors, knowing your community members, and knowing some of the resources, More is doing some great work. ONA, Oakville Neighborhood Association, is doing great work. Rhode Island's Immigration Coalition, Progreso Latino is another group, and I can't think of every single name of organizations that are doing work around immigration, but plenty of places to plug in if that is one of the areas that you are interested in showing up in solidarity with all of our neighbors.
That was a really good question, Laura. Thank you for asking it. That also reminds me I owe you an email, so thank you for standing up. A few things. One is, so the council has been, ever since January 20th, the council has been worried about this and trying to follow up. So one thing we did early on was meet with so I'll just name a few things, but also as Senator Mack and Kallman just said, also reach out to us anytime if you're seeing or hearing things or there are things you'd like us to be working on. The safety of our neighbors is just like the most important thing that we should be focused on. So if there are things that you're thinking or seeing that we're not doing, please reach out to me. But a few things that we have in the works right now. One is earlier this year we sent Know Your Rights cards to every single resident of the city of Providence and also accidentally a few residents of Cranston. So that people knew their rights immediately if anything does happen to them. So you should all have received that in the mail sometime in May to June-ish, and I hope you still have those. If not, we do have extra copies and I'm happy to hand more out. We also met early on with the solicitors as well as with the police, and I talked to Chief Perez very regularly, and the schools were all given guidance about what types of warrants they would need to actually allow ICE into the buildings. They were warned early on and armed with information. I believe we've also provided that to places of worship and other places like that, because I think a lot of folks think they have to let ICE in immediately, but there's actually specific requirements they have to go through before you have to let them in. I also really want to focus or highlight what Senator Kallman said about community support. There's a lot that we can do, and I'll share about the ordinance that we're hopefully passing this week. But a lot of what we've seen in other cities, and when I talk to fellow councilors in other places, actual neighbors standing up for neighbors or elected people standing up for other neighbors and physically going to these places is really helpful. Maybe we should all get frog costumes, importantly. But, a way to stand up directly for the other residents. And then the council right now does have an ordinance pending passage. We had a public hearing on it last week, and it passed out of committee, that further describes how the police can and cannot interact with ICE and different powers over the police. There was an incident earlier this year, I think it was in July, that was caught on body cam footage that showed what appeared to be a police officer collaborating with ICE. And so we wanted to make sure that we were being very clear about what collaboration meant and did not mean. The police, and I have a good relationship with the chief, but really didn't feel like that had been collaboration. So we want to be very clear about what is and is not collaboration, so we can have, so we are not collaborating with ICE in any ways that, unless we're like legally obligated to in some way by the federal government. And so for all the ways that we don't have to, we're just trying to clarify what they can and absolutely cannot do. And then legal recourse that residents and citizens have to sue the city if they think that we've done something inappropriate. And so that'll be up for a vote at our meeting on Thursday. All ordinances need to pass twice. Sometimes shenanigans happen between votes. So if you all are my residents, so I will be voting yes on this, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you can reach out to any, and thank you for everyone who already has. I know Nancy's emailed me, a number of folks have emailed about this ordinance, and I appreciate that. Because the coverage in the news can be really inaccurate to like actually what residents are thinking and what actually happens at committee hearings. So feel free to reach out to me anytime with your thoughts, but also if there are any other council people you want to reach out to about how they'll vote on this. All of our email addresses are on the website, but I'm happy to connect you with folks as well. But that's one thing that we're trying to do, just to be really clear about ways that we won't be interacting or supporting ICE. With our residents, but other ideas welcome. We've been trying to do as much as we can with the authority that we have, but please reach out anytime because this is the most important thing. I'll also be at the No Kings rally. I hope to see many of you there. I think many of my fellow panelists will be there too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay, I believe it's now 8 o'clock. Is there any more questions? Yes, one last question, and then we'll wrap up this rather rewarding night, so thank you.
I think this one's for Sue.
Okay.
All right, I'm Gail Gifford, I live in Summit. I understand that the school board, if not the school board ride, is coming to the city for another bond for school buildings.
We don't know that for sure yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that's what's being discussed. The Gilbert Stewart example is an example of how horrific that process has been. Disagree with you on the local control issue completely because this building is coming down. I don't know if people know that. The kids are going to get shipped off to another school during that transition time. There hasn't been good consultation. I'm also, as someone who supports the Act on Climate, very concerned that the newer and fewer schools means more transportation, more busing of kids to schools and what happened to neighborhood schools, right? So I have lots of concerns, but the bonding in particular, given that there needs to be more oversight in terms of what's happening with school construction.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that with you.
Thank you for raising that. So we've had several bonds issued to support school construction and upgrading our school buildings, which overall we say is a really positive thing. All the school buildings in the city are required to be carbon neutral by 2040, and so it's really good timing that we are already going to be renovating so many of them. And also the process has not been great, and that's something that I know the finance committee on which I sit, we've been really drilling the city's consultant or project manager for school construction, Downs Consulting. When they first started coming to us, I'm like, this is all in public records, you can see it, but they would give us PowerPoints with like 3 lines of like what the budget was, and it'd be like $5 million construction materials, $10 million labor, and we're like, this isn't a budget, we can't approve this, like what is this? So we've been requiring more and more information, but it's still not quite enough. I will say we're going to have a Ward 3 meeting with RIDE on November 3rd, location still being finalized, to talk about the MLK rebuild as well as the Hope High rebuild. I know Hope High isn't technically Ward 3, but we don't have a Ward 2 council person right now, so we want to make sure people have access to knowing about it. And it's so close. But we'll have that, we're bringing RIDE here on November, not here, maybe here, but TBD where. On November 3rd at 6 p.m. so we can learn about at least the ones happening here, but agree. And we've started sending on council our project manager, Kyle, who's really great. He goes now to all the school building authority meetings and keeps us more in the loop on what's happening because these decisions have been happening in the dark. So I appreciate you raising that, and like that is something we should be working on and I should be working on and trying to share information about at least the Ward 3 ones when I find out about them. But not just what I find, but ferreting out information to share with you, and also the whole thing needs more oversight. So I just want to say I appreciate that, Gail, and that's something we all should be working on. And that we don't know for sure yet that there'll be an additional bond, but they have raised that at a public meeting as a possibility. So.
Yes, you do. Get up here. Use it.
People hate mics.
I don't care. No, it's important.
Speak like we don't have it.
Yeah, I always do. Do charter schools have to comply with the carbon neutral by 2040 rule?
The carbon neutral by 2040 rule is for all municipally owned buildings, and so it's all public school buildings, but also all municipally owned buildings, so like City Hall, the police buildings. If the charter schools own their own building, they do not have to comply. They are not publicly owned buildings, but if they're in a publicly owned building, they have to comply.
But doesn't Rhode Island Department of Education oversee the charter schools in some way?
It's about, the carbon neutral ordinance is about buildings owned by the city. We can't control buildings not owned by the city. Yeah, but that's a good
That's
question.
that was the question, Paul. Okay.
Good thing I have that.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you for coming. We will be doing this again next year, so I hope you will come again and tell your friends and neighbors. We have food and drink in the back. Please help us yourselves because we don't want to have to take it home. And I think everybody's willing to stay for a few minutes to answer any more questions. So again, thank you.